Mike, a little background about you before we get into your journey that took you from coast to coast. Where were you born, raised, reared? Where are you from? What's your tale?
Well, I was actually conceived in Anchorage, but I was born in Portland, Oregon. I only lived there for 3 weeks, and then returned to Anchorage, and then my family came to Homer when I was 5.
Well, so you moved here when you were just a toddler, and then what? What kept you here? Why are you still in Homer, Alaska after all these years?
I left after high school and went back to Oregon, went to college, and I was gone for 6 years. Finished graduate school there, and then went to the slope to pay back my college loans, and also the mercenary in me wanted to take advantage of what was available. I met my wife in 1975 on the slope, and we subsequently got married. And the following January of 76, we did not want to go back to the slope. She's a Fairbanks girl, and fortunately said we didn't have to live in Fairbanks.
You won that round.
Yeah. And then we looked around the state, and my mother had a very small insurance agency, one person. And my father had been injured on the job and had to stay home, and she had to take care of him. And so I told her I would buy the agency from her, run it for 2 years, and then Kathy and I would be relocating to the lower 48. And that was in 1976.
Best laid plans.
Well, we've been very happy here. We've raised 3 children, and we may well get a secondary dwelling sometime somewhere else, but this will always be our primary residence.
We're here to talk about your trek on a bicycle from west to east coast, but explain to me just briefly, how do you go from now a two-person agency to a a large agency that then was purchased by a larger entity all those years later? What was the leap? What happened?
There's nothing magic about it. I mean, you simply get up and go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. You stay there till 7 o'clock at night, and you do your best to communicate with the community and with individuals. And Homer is the only reason that we were successful. It's simply built itself. We did some business outside of the immediate area, but not very much really. And then when Wells Fargo came along and offered to buy the agency and then combine it with several other agencies and asked me to run their statewide operation, it was a relatively easy transition to make.
Mm-hmm. You did that. You've then retired from the insurance business, and you wake up one day and you say, you know what would be kind of cool? If I got on my bicycle and I went from one shore to the other shore of the United States of America. Describe that. Describe what into planning the trip, the decision behind it, and then we'll get into the journey.
It didn't happen exactly that way. I actually, the first thing I decided I wanted to try to do was to climb. And so I flew to, I had never climbed anything. The stairs.
And the corporate ladder, if you will. But other than that.
I never got very high on the corporate ladder. Believe me, it's a slippery slope. So I flew to Washington and took a 7-day course on Mount Rainier, crevasse retrieval and those kinds of things. And then we summited Mount Rainier. And that was in September of 2010. I remember coming back to Camp Muir, which is at 10,000 feet, and lying there and listening to all the other participants, there were 8 of us in the party. Well, this is what we're going to do next in this one. And saying to myself, I will never do this again.
That's it.
I was absolutely exhausted. Of course, I was the oldest member of the group, but that's no defense. I went back to Seattle and stayed with my daughter for a couple of days. We went to a bookstore. I bought a few books. And then the following summer, flew to Russia and climbed Mount Elbrus from the north side. Our guide was a Russian fellow, about 72 years old. And it was a very difficult climb for
You're
me.
indicating short in stature. You're holding
Yes.
your hand. So he wasn't a very tall fellow.
No.
Very small man.
Yeah, but and then our American guide was Vern Tejas, and people who climb would know Vern. He's well known worldwide.
So you say you're not going to climb again, but then you decide.
Well, I decided,
I'm gonna do it again.
I could try one more.
Right.
And so we did summit, although it was very difficult for me. We made the summit, and we came back to high camp, and then coming down, it was hard. But I flew from there then to Kilimanjaro in Tanzania and climbed Kilimanjaro 10 days later and summited. And then, I remember coming down Elbrus thinking, I had met one of the fellows that would have been with me on Rainier, did long bike rides, and I've ridden bikes for, 15 years or so, thinking, if I wasn't roped to these guys, I could stop when I want to and rest.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm on a bicycle by myself, I can stop whenever I want to and rest
Right.
and have a drink. And so maybe that would be a better thing for me to do.
That's my new thing.
So the following spring, I flew down to Eugene, Oregon, and I picked up a bike that I had ordered, made by CoMotion. Their factory is there in Eugene, and I rode from Eugene down to LA. And again,
Was that a couple hundred, 300 miles maybe?
it's 1,200 miles.
Oh, 1,200 miles.
1,200
All right.
miles.
All right.
And you go through the redwoods in Big Sur, and it's pretty challenging country, even though it's not that high, 1,000 feet or so. But you're constantly going up and down. There's nothing flat about the Oregon or California coast.